My name is Anthony Allen, welcome here to my YouTube channel, and in this video I'll be teaching you Final Cut Pro 10. This is part 1 of a 10-part series that I'm doing for Final Cut Pro 10 beginners. My name is Anthony Allen and I'll be taking you through your first lesson for Final Cut Pro 10. So once you've downloaded Final Cut Pro 10 from the App Store, the next thing to do is to locate Final Cut Pro 10. The easiest way to do this, in my opinion, is to use the Launchpad. Imagine the Launchpad a lot like the Start menu that you find on Windows. This is where you can find your applications, or in terms of Windows, your programs. If you select the Launchpad, you'll be given this fancy screen here where you can see all of your programs that you have installed, or most of your programs that you have installed. In order to find Final Cut Pro 10, once it's fully installed, you can go into the search bar and you can actually search for Final Cut. Or if you have a trackpad, you can swipe left or right in order to search for the program that you need. We're going to go for the search. So if you type Final for Final Cut Pro 10, you will automatically find any programs that have Final within the title, and of course this includes Final Cut Pro. I then want you to select Final Cut Pro. This should open the program. So at this point the program is deciding to give us the color wheel, the dreaded color wheel, which means that something is loading. You can see that I'm using version 10.4.8 of Final Cut Pro 10 or FCPX. And here you can see some of the projects that I've already began or created. You can see the name of the library in which the project is contained. You can see the last date and time it was modified or changed. And you can also see the location of these projects. And that is in my Toshiba external hard drive. Now you can either locate, and by locate it means find, so you can search for something that you don't see here in your most recent projects, or you can create a new project and library. I'll explain what libraries are and what a project is shortly. We're going to select new. Now at this point it's actually giving us the most recent location in which we created a project. For you, this most likely will be within your movies folders. Imagine the movies folder a lot like where all your movie orientated projects will be located. That is within your hard drive of your Mac machine. So what we're going to do, because my Toshiba external hard drive has a lot more space, is I am going to actually create my project within this hard drive. But of course you can choose where you would like to create your project to. But keep in mind that a project can bloat and can become very large and take up a lot of space in that location. So if you save your project or create your project on the desktop and your desktop does not have a lot of space or is not utilizing an iCloud storage, then of course this can take up a lot of space on your desktop. So keep this in mind. So I'm going to use the Toshiba external drive, which is my external drive. And we're going to call this, in big bold capitals, tutorial for YouTube, or YT, the abbreviated. Now we're going to click save. This will create that project in this location. If I want to open this project again, or I want to locate it, I would go into the external hard drive to just simply double click and it will open automatically within Final Cut. A lot like when you create a Word document within Microsoft Word. So we're going to click save. This has now created our library, and at this point we can create a project. So on screen now you can see that the interface is not at its biggest scale. The reason I know this is because we can see things outside of the Final Cut program itself. For example, the desktop. We can see some of the files on the desktop, and we can also see the toolbar below. If you don't want this on screen, you can select this green button in the top left hand corner, which enlarges Final Cut Pro. This will also remove the top tool tab that you can see here. But let's show you what happens. So we're going to click this to enter full screen mode now. As you can see, this has removed any other distractions, but if I hover my mouse over the toolbar, it will appear. And of course, the same with the top toolbar. What it used to, I'm not sure what's going on here. You have to click now. So of course, with the top toolbar, if you click, that will also appear too. And now, once it's clicked, it's doing what it's supposed to, and it's appearing whenever I move my mouse in that direction. So we have our first library, which is where your projects are created, and your interface, where you would do most of your editing within Final Cut Pro. I'll explain what all these panels are shortly. So you can see that in our project library here, sorry, pardon me, I don't want to confuse you. So you can see that in our library here, the tutorial YouTube library, we don't currently have anything except for these two indicators which separate things. You probably won't have this for your Final Cut Pro. Of course, if you haven't installed any plugins that would separate things as such. You might have an event file, which is what this is. Basically categorizes anything you've imported by a certain date, which helps you find anything or anything you've created within your library. Let's keep things simple. So the next step would be to create your project. Let's select New Project within the timeline window down below. You can see that a pop-up has now appeared on screen, and we can call our project whatever we like. For example, in big capitals, we're going to call this Part 1. You can also see that this new project will be located in an events folder, which is dated. So any projects that you create will be in a event folder with a date, so that if you create multiple projects on the same date, you can go back to that date and find those projects within your library. Now you have a starting time code. I suggest you don't mess with this, because of course you want your timeline to start at the start and not at any other point of your project. And then of course you have the video properties for your video. So right here you can see that I have selected, well, it automatically has selected, or the last settings that I had, which was 1080p HD. Then you have the resolution for this, as 1080p videos can be different sizes. The resolution is the size of the 1080p video. For example, the 1080p video can be 1440 by 1080 or 1280 by 1080. Then after this you have the frame rate. The frame rate is also interchangeable. You can have 23.98, you can have 23.98, 24, 25, 29.97 frames per second, 30 frames per second, 50 frames per second, 59.94 frames per second, or 60 frames per second. Keep in mind that when you're changing this actual frames per second, this resolution, and of course the format of your project, any clips that you send into your timeline will have to be rendered to suit this setting. So if you're dragging in a 720 video into your timeline, it will then have to be rendered to change that video into a 1080p video. So of course, next underneath this you have the Apple ProRes rendering. So this is how your clips or your media will be rendered. Now, an Apple ProRes 4444 is not what we need for the type of video that we are creating. So I'm going to go into this, and I'm actually going to save this at a 422. Apple ProRes 422 is actually the default that Final Cut Pro 10 has already set as the codecs for your rendering of your projects. Then of course you have your audio sample rate, but this is not something that you would also pay attention to if you are a beginner within Final Cut Pro 10. Up next, you have the automatic settings. Let's say you filmed a whole video in 720p and you don't want to change anything about the resolution, the frame rate, or the format of that video. If this was the case, then you would select Use Automatic Settings, so that when you drag your first clip into the timeline, it will actually match all these properties of your entire project. As I've just mentioned, setting these attributes differently for your project would mean that any media you drag into your timeline will have to be rendered to suit your project settings. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to leave it at 1920 by 1080 and possibly bump this up to 29, actually no, let's go one step further, 30 frames per second, just because I like nice round numbers. At this point, we're going to select OK. Well done! You've just created your first Final Cut Pro project. This project can be found within your tutorials library. If you were to create another library, this would not be contained within it. But we'll get onto multiple libraries on a later date. So hopefully that has explained a lot for you within Final Cut Pro 10. This is the first stage of getting started with your project, and understanding what I've just taught you here will definitely save you a lot of headaches down the line, as rendering can become more complicated with the more different types of clips and audio and media you import into your project. In the next lesson, I'll be showing you how to import to Final Cut Pro. If you've enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you'd like to watch more. My name's Anthony Allen. You've been watching my video here, and I'll see you in the next one.